That's going to be the last episode in the Minesweeper series. And in this video, in the last 3 to 4 minutes, we are going to play the game from beginning to end, and we are going to try to beat the game that we developed. So it's going to be fun to look if we are going to be able to beat the game and win it and go through all the cells without clicking even on one single mine. So in that episode, we are going to develop some functionalities like how to mark cells as mine candidates, and as well as some few additions that will complete the game, and there you will have a fun game that you can play and also a perfect portfolio project for yourself. Let's get started. Okay, so let's show an example of what we want to do in that episode. So if we run our game and we start to play a bit, and for example we click here, we know that we have 3 mines around there. But in order to start figuring out what could be the mines, I mean the cells that you should not click on, then you need some utility that will say to yourself that you should not click on that in the future. So it could have been nicer if we could develop a feature that will color the cell in a different color, so we can differentiate between the cells that we mark as mine candidates. And that's exactly what we are going to design in that episode. So the way that this feature is going to work is by using the right click of our mouse button. So if we are going to right click on a cell, then it is going to color it with a color like orange, maybe some color that will be a good color to differentiate between a mine candidate to an actual mine that basically leads us to lose the game. So it's basically going to be something that will be responsible to color the cell with the given color. Now say that we clicked on some location that we marked as mine candidate. We also like to develop the opposite action, which is going to be unmark the cell as a mine candidate. So those are both of the functionalities that we are going to work just right now. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the approach of doing something like this, it is going to be pretty much similar to what we have done with the isOpened attribute. We could first start with creating a new attribute to each of our cell objects that will go something like self.isMineCandidate, something like that. And this value could be false for each of our cells at first. The reason that this could happen is because at first we never mark our cells as mine candidates. We just start with a new blank game. So now that we have such an attribute, it makes sense to go ahead and take some actions when we right click on a cell. And if you remember, we already have a method that is called right click actions, and we could find this just by scrolling down a bit, because this should be right here. Okay, there it is. So here's the exact location that I could allow myself to do something when we right click on a cell. And one of the things that I can do is to change the attribute from false to true. So I can go ahead and say if not self.isMineCandidate. So I'm checking if the cell is already not a mine candidate. Then I can go ahead and do some things. Now, one of the first things that I want to do is to change the background color of the cell, so it is going to visually mark it as a mine candidate. So it will be self.cellbtn object.configure, and we are going to call this method, and I'm just going to pass in here bg background color equals to orange. And now that I have done this, I can also allow myself to change from false to true. So I can say self.is_mine_candidate equals to true, like the following. So now let's go ahead and test if that is going to work for us. So I'm going to execute our game, and I'm just going to right click on a cell, and you can see that this works perfectly. Now we said that we'd also like to design the opposite action, which is just what we are going to do now. And before we do that, I want you to notice something important in here. You see that the cells left is not decreased, and that is good because we did not open this cell, right? So that's an important behavior that we want to keep. So it doesn't matter how many times we are going to right click, it's good that the cells left value is not decreasing here. So that's something that I wanted to show up. Alright, so now that we have this, then we should also design the opposite action by only saying here else. So now we are doing something if the cell is already a mine candidate. Now the next time that we're going to right click on a cell and we know that the cell is mine candidate, then we just want to do the opposite action. So the opposite action will be to configure the color to the original color. So it will be self.cellBTNObject.configure. We're gonna call this method. Now this might be confusing here, but there is a specific value for the background color that you should specify that is already the default color for each of the hinter elements that you are creating, and that is called system button face. And that is just the color that you see in the beginning, right? The kind of gray color. So that's the reason that I'm writing this thing as the value of the BG. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is obviously changing this to false. So I'm going to say self.is mine candidate is equal to false, like that. And that's probably going to work without any surprises. So if I'm right clicking one time, two times, three times, then now let's try to undo our action. So I'm going to again right click here and again here and as well as here. You can see that this works. So that's a great start for having some mine candidates going on. Now let's also try to play the game with that, right? See if we did something bad to rest of our game. So that's a good test for us. So I'm going to left click, basically open some cells, and you can see that this works. I can continue on clicking here, here and there, and that's working great. Now let's say that I think that this is a mine here. So I'm just going to right click, continue opening that, and as well as that one. Now this is actually a mine because, for example, if we take a look at this cell, right, you can see that it's supposed to have one mine in here, 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 or there. So that's the mine for sure. So that's good feature now that we can mark this as a mine candidate. So we know that we should never click on that with the left mouse click. Now I just wanted to remind something that could lead you to some problems using this mine candidate feature. I said earlier in this series that if you use button dash 3 like I did in here, then you might have some problems because in some mouse configurations it expects for button dash 2. But since I have the mouse wheel in my mouse, then it should be button dash 3 for myself. So if you notice that things are not working for you pretty much as expected, then try to use other combinations of numbers like 2 or even 4. Just try to use something that is not 3, and I want to hope that it will work for you. Alright, so now that we have done this, then let's go ahead and design some final things that we want in order to have the complete game. Now we already know that we pretty much not finish the game when we actually click on a mine. So I'm going to do something that will immediately warn a message that we lost the game if we click on a mine. Now in order to do this, I'm going to assume that you are working on a Windows machine, but the way that you should quit a game with an exception is really up to you. I'm just going to show one example, but there are tons of other options that you can go ahead with it. And of course, since I'm using a Windows machine, then this example might be more fit for Windows environments. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is import some library that will be responsible to throw a general message about how we lost the game or something like that. So in order to do that, I like the library that is called ctypes. And that's just a library that can help you to throw generic messages, warnings, errors, any kind of things that you want to come up with them. So now that we have this, then I'm going to use this library and basically throw a message if we open a mine. Now if you remember, we have a method that is called showMine, and you see that we already have a comment that says a logic to interrupt the game and display a message that player lost. So here's the exact location that we want to write such a functionality, and that's what I'm about to do right now. So if we delete this, now I'm going to go ahead and just write a generic message. So we are going to use this ctypes library, and then I'm going to pick up the win DLL sublibrary, and then I'm going to use the user32, and then I'm going to say message box W, like that. Now this is just a generic message box that I'm going to throw out. Alright, so I'm going to pass in here several arguments, and once we see the result, then I will explain why I did that. Okay, so I will start by saying 0, and then I will say you clicked on a mine, and I will pass in one more string that will look like game over, and then I will again pass in the argument of 0. Now before we test this, I want to change the ordering in here. So first we'd like to change the configuration of this background color to red, and then we'd like to throw a message. Alright, so now let's go ahead and play the game and intentionally click on a mine, right? So let's try to click somewhere here. Okay, so you can see that we receive a general message box. Now you can see if we show this side by side, like the following, then you can see that at first, where is the message box? Here it is. So you can see that the first string was responsible to the body of our message box because we see the you clicked on a mine in its body. And you can see that the second text was responsible to show the title. Now those numbers here and here are responsible to deliver you specific kinds of message boxes. Now the fact that I have 0 here is responsible to give me only one option of a button to click, and that will be okay. I think if I was to change this to something like 2, then I would receive the options of yes, no, and cancel, something in that kind. So I'm going to rerun our game, and again I'm going to lose it. Okay, so you can see that I was quite right. It is abort, retry, and ignore. And you can try to play around with different numbers and you will see different results. But for myself, I only want to receive okay, just confirm it and continue with rest of the actions that I want to do. And I'm going to refer you to a link which will explain you what number is responsible for what. So if you want to take further actions with this message box, be sure to check the link in the description. Alright, so I'm going to press somewhere, just turn it back to 0 and maximize our PyCharm and continue from here. Alright, so right after we have this message box and right after we clicked OK, then we should just terminate the game, we should exit it. Now you have all the options what you'd like to do whenever you click OK. You can also decide that you'd like to develop a functionality to restart the game. I'm just going to exit it. And the way that you exit a Python process that is running is by cys.exit, like that. Now cys is a library that you should import, so I'm going to scroll up and say import cys, and let's see if everything together is going to work perfectly for us. So I'm going to run the game and let's try to again lose it intentionally. Okay, so you clicked on a mine. The second that I press OK, it should be terminated. And that's exactly what is happening. So that's a perfect thing, and now we have a complete game that we can try to play. We can try to win it, and we might also lose it sometimes, and we just need to play again until we win the Minesweeper game. Alright, so now that we have done this, then there are several things that we also want to finish out before we have the complete game without any bugs and without any problems. So now if we try to play the game, and let's assume that we have some mines that are candidates for a mine. So let's just randomly click here, and then let's assume that I marked this as a mine candidate, although it doesn't make sense. And right after that I left click on that, right? Like the following. Then you can see that now we have a bit of problem, because we might also expect to have the original background color again. So what we need to do, we need to also specify, in case we left click on a cell and we open it, we also want to be configuring the background color to the original system button face color that we used. So that's exactly what we should do now in order to not face with a situation like the following, where we have an open cell, but we also have this cell as being shown like a mine candidate, which is pretty funny, and we need to handle that. So we should go to our open cell method, or show cell, here it is, and we should be doing the exact same action of changing the background color to system button face right here, right? So we can go ahead and say here something like, if this was a mine candidate, then for safety we should configure the background color to system button face, something like that, so we can really understand in the future why we have done this here as well. And I'm just going to do the same thing like we have done previously. So it's going to be self.cellBTNObject.configure, and that's going to be bg equals to system button face, like that. And let's go ahead and check if this is going to fix the bug for us. So I'm going to click here, mine candidate, and then left click. So this looks great. This looks like it works. So we can continue to do the next things that we want to do right now. Alright, so now we might think that we have the perfect game without any bugs, but let me tell you that we still have some problems that we could figure out in order to have the perfect game and the perfect code for the game. So if we try to launch our game, then let's try to click on some places here, like here and as well as there. Alright, so works great, but yet let me tell you that if we click with our left click on some cell, then this still is going to call the left click actions method, which that might be something that we want to avoid, because there is no reason to call any method if we already opened a cell. And it might seem like it doesn't do anything to you because the cells left amount is not decreasing, but actually something is happening in the background. Okay, let me prove you by also try to click with my right mouse click. So if we right click now, then you can see that I can still mark those as mine candidates, which is not good. So the way that we want to handle this is by canceling the events for the buttons, I mean the cells that already have been opened. So the way that we can do this is use the opposite action of the method that was responsible to assign the event. So we assigned some events in the beginning of this entire series. Now if cell has been opened, we want to cancel those events. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that one. So you can see that here we assign events for left click and for right click. So if we open a cell, then we should do the opposite action. And let me tell you that tkinter has a method that is called unbind, meaning cancel all the events that are assigned to that specific button, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do just right now. So I'm going to go to our left click actions, and I'm going to execute here some lines that will be responsible to cancel all the events on the clicked cell. So I'm going to say cancel left and right click events if cell is already opened. And that is safe to do that, because in case we left click on a cell, then we open a cell. And if we lose the game, then the game just exits. So it makes sense to write here this functionality. So it's going to look like self.cellBTNObject.unbind, and we're gonna need to call this twice. So we are going to unbind the events for button-1. So I'm going to just copy this string and paste this in here, and I'm going to do the same for button-3, and that should be responsible to cancel all the events. Now let's check if that's going to work. So I'm going to launch the game and click somewhere, and now I'm going to try to right click on that. You can see nothing happens, and that's exactly what we want. Let's also test with some other location, like here, here, and here maybe. So now I will try to left click. You can see nothing really happens. If I right click, and again nothing really happens, but if I right click here, then something's supposed to happen. So that's exactly what we want. We want to cancel the events for the cells that are already opened. Alright, so there's going to be one final thing that we want to do before we can play the game from the beginning to the end. Now, the case that we win a game is in case that we have the amount of cells being equal to amount of mines. Let me repeat that. Now let's say that in this case we have 9 mines in our game, right? Because if you remember from settings.py, we know that mines count is cell count divided by 4. Now in our case, it is 6 power of 2, which is 36, divided by 4 is 9. So whenever we have 9 cells left in the game, but we still able to play the game, then here's the exact case that we can raise a message that we won the game, right? Congratulations, something in that kind. So that's exactly the last thing that we want to do just right now, all right? So let's go ahead and try to design this. I will go to cell.py file, and it makes sense to raise a message like congratulations if on show cell we have the expected match, right? Where cells count is equal to the mines count. So I can just go under the self.show cell and I can say something like if mines count is equal to the cells left count, player 1, something like that. And let's write this, right? So I'm going to say if cell count, if you remember this was a class attribute, is equal to settings dot mines count, then I'm just going to copy the line that was responsible to show a message, and I'm only going to change the text inside of that. So let's find this message. It should be in the show mine method. So I'm going to just Control F that, and you can see that here it is. So I'm just going to copy that and paste this in right here, and I'm only going to change the arguments. So I'm going to say game over, congratulations, you won the game, something like that. Alright, so now that we have this, let's play our game from the beginning to the end. Alright, so before we go ahead and try the game from the beginning to end, we said that we'd like to have a title for the game, and that's something that we should do earlier, so let me do that quickly. Let's do this together by writing game_title is equal to a label. We said that for creating pure text, it is a great idea to use the label class of tkinter library, and we want to position this in the top frame. We want the background color being black, and the foreground color, meaning the text color, to be white. Now we'd also like to pass in here text equals to Minesweeper game, and the font should be a tuple, and the first argument of the tuple should be the font type, so you can play around with any font type you'd like to. I will just leave it an empty string, and I will say size is equal to 48, like that. And now that I have this, then I'm also going to say game title dot place, and let's use 25% of the width size of the top frame. We have this utils.widthprct, which receives the amount of percentage to use from the x-axis. And now that I have this, then I'm going to go out from these parentheses, and I'm going to say y is equal to 0, and then I'm just going to launch the game, and you can see that it looks great. Alright, so speaking about playing the game, let's try to figure out how we can win that game. So I'm just going to play it and guess where the mines are located. Alright, so we have one mine surrounded here, and we clicked on a mine. It might take a few times until we win it, but let's hope for the best. Okay, so that's a mine as well. That was a mine. If we click here on the middle, so we have 3 here, so it's quite dangerous to try to figure out where the mines are located. Okay, so we have some zeros, and that's the best practice probably to go with. Okay, so you can see that around this one here, we have one mine. So say that we guess that we have a mine here, then we are allowed to click there. Okay, so we guessed right. And so you can see that here we have a 1, and there is already a mine here, so we can click here for sure. Alright, so now we need to figure out where rest of the mines. So here we have 3 mines surrounded, and as well as here. So I'm going to assume that we have a mine here for sure, and as well as here. So this means that we don't have a mine here and we lost the game. So let's give it one more try. Maybe you can win it. Let me know in the comment section if you can win this Minesweeper game. It is quite important, and let's give it a last try. I promise I'm not going to try anymore because the video is just going to be too long. Alright, so if we click here, so we have 1 mine around here, so I'm not going to guess that. Okay, so some zeros are great for us, and going to guess that here we have a mine, so here we don't have a mine. Alright, nice guess. So now it means that I can click here, 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 here and there, and also here. So you can see that now, looking at this one, you can see that there is a mine here. So I'm also allowed to click there, also here, and also here. Alright, so now that we have this, we can also try to click here because we have a 1 there. Okay, so now we know that we have 1 mine around this one. So that's a mine for sure. And this means that if we look in this number, then we can also click here, here, and here. Alright, so looking at this one, we can click here because that's a mine for sure. So now we can look on this one. That's a mine that we marked as a mine candidate, so we can click here. Alright, so now it is getting complicated. If we guess that here we have a mine, then we can left click here. Alright, great guess. We can continue playing. So you can see that looking at this tree, this and that are mines absolutely, right? So we already found 6. So 3 more to go. It's quite exciting. Alright, so I think I don't have anything left to guess. So I need to go here up top. And I'm going to think that that's a mine. So if I left click here, oh my god. Alright, so I leave you all the time in the world to try to figure out and play the game and win it. And I think that's pretty much it about this series. Now, as usual, if you enjoyed this entire course, please be sure to hit the like button so we will spread this video on YouTube and it will come up to the highest possible position in the search. And that's it. So I hope you all enjoyed and see you on my next series.